everyone, my name is Rich Hardy. I'm a vegan farmer and I run a little farm with my partner here, Pri, over at Kuzgan, so quite close to here, 20 minutes. But historically I haven't always been a vegan farmer. If any of you were here last year, I did a little talk last year about my background as an investigative journalist. And essentially I spent 20 years working undercover, documenting animal industries across the globe. So primarily focused on documenting and gaining evidence for news media, NGOs, campaigning groups, all looking to build campaigns around solutions to ending animal industries like factory farming, like the slaughter industry, like animals in experimentation, animals in entertainment, the fashion industry. So yeah, that was essentially what I was doing, and a couple of years ago I wrapped up from that work. As you can imagine, spending a long time away across the globe, being someone you're not, which was essentially my job, because my role, my speciality as an investigative journalist was to infiltrate. And to infiltrate meant you have to spend long periods of time immersed in cultures and workplaces and industries that you are very opposed to. So that involved a few sacrifices, but it was incredibly interesting and also incredibly challenging as well at the same time, because I've been a vegan since I was a youngster. I'm now 50, I think. Yeah, 50. And I've been vegan since I was a teenager. And actually, I turned vegan just around the point where I started a very different career in professional football. It was a very short-lived career, but I can tell you now it was one that I'm very glad to see the back of. And it was also one that was very unreceptive to vegan lifestyles. So if you can imagine like a 16, 17-year-old vegan in a football squad, living amongst teammates who are fueled by meat and dairy, which is very much what athletics, I guess, was surviving behind. It felt an odd place, and as a result, perhaps my ethics, ended up taking me away from that industry, which is great because I've got into campaigning, and I've always been someone who likes to try and challenge people, expose practices and industries and systems that are having an impact on the planet. And one of the industries I was really particularly struck by wanting to do something about was factory farming. And essentially, like the food industry, involves so many animals. The scale is absolutely huge, and it was something that I felt at the time needed more light shone on it. So that's what I set about doing. So over 100 assignments later, 30 countries, like I said, spending weeks, months undercover and exposing from within. It was time for a change. But before I ended up, I decided to write down what I'd learned during this period, and I wrote this book called Not As Nature Intended a couple of years ago. It was published by Unbound. Had a foreword by Chris Packham, who's been a very supportive ambassador for my work. I'm very grateful to have his support, and I think we should all be grateful for people like Chris, because he does such great, fantastic work. The book, Not As Nature Intended, if you like sort of surreal, hard-hitting type non-fiction, Louis Theroux, John Ronson type stuff, then you might be interested in this account. Everything from spending 2 winters shadowing fur trappers in the US, very dangerous people, very cruel people. But the fashion industry is still fueled, by its use of animals in the leather and fur industries. And just a little note for your diaries while I'm talking about fur. There is a new film documentary coming out in just a couple of weeks, on September the 8th. It will be launching on Waterbat, which is a kind of green Netflix. Lots of great documentaries up there that don't often find the space to go to other places. And yeah, it's called Slay, and it's the first expose of the fashion industry.
Fashion is such a brilliant tool for communication and expression, but I think because of those really lovely aspects, the social and environmental impacts have maybe been slightly overlooked.
My name is Rebecca, and I grew up in the fashion capital of the world, Paris. I love shopping, but I also want to know, what am I really paying for?
You have to take what we're putting on our bodies every day slightly seriously.
Animals disappear into fashion objects in a way that's very troubling and in a way that's intentionally hidden.
It's a form of moral insanity that we justify this behavior in any kind of way.
No one wants to talk about the animals used for shoes, bags, and clothing.
We're in this system that has normalized cruelty on a massive scale.
Fashion brands are selling a dream, and they don't want us to see the reality, but I have to find out what's really going on.
This is an industry that don't want society to understand what they do. They don't want their secrets shared with the wider public.
Of course they know what they are doing. It's part of the business to have a very weak traceability.
I think that it will make it a lot harder for people to support these products, knowing where they came from.
Is it acceptable to kill animals for fashion?
That is a very big question.
I've got copies of this. If anyone's interested, yeah, I can do some copies at the end today. But let's move on from animal industries, animal cruelty, animal suffering, food production, and let's look at trying to solve that. You know, we are in a food crisis right now. We are in a system which is, you know, causing a great deal of suffering on our planet. You know, it's taking, and not giving anything back. But, you know, our planet doesn't work like that. You know, we have to keep giving it back and, you know, looking to replace what we've taken with something good. Like, you know, what this place here does. You know, it's growing food. It's growing minds, it's winning over hearts about, you know, how to do things differently, and we need to like do this on a much bigger scale because our food system is like not just cracking at the seams, it's completely broken. It really is, right down to, you know, its impact on the environment, our waterways. But even, you know, I think back to 10 years ago. You know, I was documenting in factory farms in Italy, those big sort of prestigious names that you might be familiar with, the big Parma hams, those sort of companies that, you know, sort of embrace all the good things about food culture. You know, they produce all this wonderful meat, it's wrapped in a Tuscan sunset, you know, that's what the labelling says. But the reality is, it's hundreds of thousands of pigs, you know, locked up in cages and crates, the most filthy conditions. And not only is it heartbreaking seeing that, but I remember going to some of these farms. The pharmacies on these farms were bigger than what you'd find in the high streets. I mean, they had to be, because you go into those sheds and you'd be like confronted by, you know, a Mexican wave of pneumonia and pigs running up one aisle, coming back down, smacking you in the face. It's a very, very sick place. And they need pharmacies, you know, to keep food growing just long enough to get it onto meats and plates for people. Without antibiotics, these industries wouldn't work. They're artificial in all kinds of different ways. But yeah, believe me when I tell you the medications that are going into factory farming are absolutely huge. But antibiotics are becoming resistant now because of their sort of systemic use on factory farms, and as a result, it's us that are going to be suffering. From what used to be a great sort of solution for us when we got sick. All those years of research and success in staving off common colds and illnesses that were fairly prevalent across society. All that's starting to fall away, and the health industry are very, very concerned about this. So factory farming is having an impact not just for animals, it's having an impact on us. It's having an impact on our waterways, pollution, runoff, climate change, emissions. It's all, if I think about all the roads that lead to, the way that we're harming our society and our planet, and I go backtrack down those paths and roads, it'll all take me to a factory farm. That's how bad things are for this country. So, what does a washed-up campaigner, activist, investigative journalist do when he's burnt out from seeing all these injustices taking place across the world? Well, he turns to vegan farming. And you might think, vegan farming, well, aren't all vegetables and fruits, aren't they all vegan anyway? No, they're not. If you look really close enough, you'll find that these horticulture industries, they follow the same sort of map that factory farms do. Very big, very highly integrated, big control of the food chains and supply chains, and they are very reliant on those waste products that come out of the food industry. So animal manures, fish, bone meal, those crushed insects, shells. These are all things that are waste products from the food industry that end up finding a place in horticulture. So, if you want to be a vegan farmer, you have to move away from all that. And there's actually a few of us in the audience here today that are following these veganic farming principles, and all quite local as well. I think Cornwall's a good advert for trying to farm very differently. So, what do I want to do? I want to still tell stories about what's happening in our world, but I want to connect it to solutions, because I don't just want to be someone who says there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem over there, and not be someone who can say, but hey, we could do it this way. So I wanted to do something with a solution-based focus to it. So essentially, got a small piece of land, 1 acre. You can grow a lot on 1 acre, actually. We're not actually using the whole acre. We're probably using about 25% of it at the moment. But find yourself a piece of land. Not easy in this country where land is in the hands of the wealthy, and they have a lot of it. And also they get a lot of subsidies for it as well. You get subsidies to do lots of bad things. If you're a small grower, you get no subsidies at all while you're doing lots of good things. So that's the way things work right now. Very unfair. But anyway, looking beyond that, what have we done? Well, we've turned this 1 acre farm, this 1 acre pasture field, into a small market garden business. We do veg boxes through the season. We're very seasonal. We only run from May to, I think last year we wrapped up in November. But that allows us to produce enough food for, I think we did 1 or 2 weeks at about 20 people last week, but generally we're doing 12 to 15 veg boxes a week in a very, very localised zone. It's not yet become profitable, but it's profitable in all kinds of other ways, because it's helped to tell the local community about food and tell that story. It's also helped to connect the dots with them in terms of a bigger growing society, and how food, whether it's fruit or vegetables, also has a connection to big agriculture. So people have started to learn something from it. They've also learned that they don't have to rely on the supermarket every week to give them what they need, and they don't have to travel to the supermarket every week because we would deliver to them. We have a small range. We do probably 5, 6, 7 miles tops, but mostly we're delivering within a mile of the farm. And what else does it bring? Well, actually it's really nice because we're helping to, I think, keep that sense of community going, in the same way that, people who work in the postal service, every week, every day, they might visit, 1 or 2 people that don't get a lot of company from others. They provide that sort of personal touch, and they can check in on them, see how they are, and I think that brings some sort of well-being sort of benefits. And I think that's very much the same with our project. We're not just growing for the food; we're growing a community, and I think vegan farms have the potential to do this up and down the country if you can get access to the land. That's the tricky thing. But like I said, you don't need a big piece of land to grow a lot of food. You can grow a lot on a little. So we've been, embracing sort of our community side. We're sort of like telling people about, the damages that factory farming is doing to the world. We've also been sharing this story about seasonal food. It's so important to eat seasonally, and in Cornwall we're still very reliant on food coming in from across the globe that we can grow, just as easily here. Maybe not all year round, but we can certainly grow a lot of the fun, interesting stuff here in Cornwall for the time that we should be eating those products. So I guess what I'm saying is we have a very low sort of impact on the environment. What we do at our farm is not just produce healthy vegetables. We pick and harvest on the same day, so we get it into people's kitchens within probably 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe tops from when it's picked. So it's really super, super fresh. What we're also doing is we're not using any oil on the farm itself. Unfortunately, we are using a bit of oil in the deliveries, but on the actual farm itself, no chemicals, no pesticides. Obviously that's all coming from the oil industry, that's the way they like it. They don't just want to use us to run our vehicles, they want to use us to grow our food too. So that's why everything is dumped on with chemicals and pesticides across the country, because the oil industry and the food industry go hand in hand. That's the way it's always been, but it doesn't have to be like that in the future. But yeah, we don't use any oil, we don't use any tractors, any sort of mechanisation. We have like a push seeder. It's like a little bicycle with a couple of handles like this, and we go up and down, our beds. No oil at all involved in that, and we're not sort of compacting the ground at all like tractors do. Tractors are good, and you can get electric tractors now. Maybe someone would like one day, but you don't have to have a tractor to actually grow a lot of food. Most of the people in the world growing food are peasants. They're part of the Via Campesina movement. They're not tied to big companies, shareholders. The majority of food grown across the world is still grown by small farmers. Not like 5'5" like me. They can be bigger. They can be a bit smaller, but who knows? We have very low outputs. All the hedgerows around the market garden, we just let them be. We let them be because our most useful volunteers are the wildlife that live in those hedges. They are in and out, day in, day out. Getting into the beds, taking some of the things that they need and some of the things that we need, less of. But also, those are actually, those insects, they're really important factors in the sort of biodiversity of your site. So, we're not looking at caterpillars and cabbage white butterflies in the same way that most farmers are, trying to squeeze them or, poison them in some way. We embrace them, we like them, and we'll set aside, an area of the site so they can have all they need. We'll just whack some kale over there and they can munch in there as long as they like. But that's kind of how you work, you don't want to fight against nature all the time. You know, weeds, you know, we don't fight against weeds. They have lots of benefits. We do keep them under control, and we do use a method called no-dig in creating our sites. So you may have seen, like, there's been maybe 1 or 2 documentaries focused on like the importance of soil over the last few years. It's like it's there for everyone. It's what we all need to grow good quality food. But you know, it's just like this incredible space where so much goes on that we've known so little about until recent years, and you've got to protect it. It's no good, you know, ploughing through there with a great big, you know, plough and chopping it all up and all the little creatures and insects and sort of biodiversity around that. That's not the way to do it. You just think like you're in a forest. You know, you basically mimic what goes on in a forest. You know, trees grow, seasons come and go, leaf litter, you know, leaves drop to the ground, leaf litter's formed. Lots of, you know, crazy things going on at that level. Fungi, you know, mycelium, you know, little bugs and critters, and you know, they're all doing what we want them to do. They're creating this like rich humus, which is, you know, going to grow other things, going to grow new trees. So we just mimic that on the market garden. So we had a field for the pasture. Most of it we covered with like cardboard just to kill back the pasture bit. And then we got some seaweed up from the north coast at Portreath, the harbour there, and we laid that to start creating our veg beds. And what's good about that is not just seaweed, which is a brilliant resource. We don't get it from the open beaches, because you're not meant to do that actually. But again, it's all about community. You know, Portreath Harbour, if anyone knows it, has like a massive seaweed problem, and the locals just get so upset with it because it does stink to high heaven. So what better than have someone like us like come there and go, we'll take it away, no problem, we'll get it off your hands, and then we'll grow it, and then we'll maybe deliver, you know, to a few people in Portreath some veg boxes from, you know, creating this sort of circular approach to growing. So yeah, that's what we do, and we also use like people's garden waste. You know, if you take garden waste to the recycling centre, hopefully you'll do a bit of composting with it as well, because that's always good. But you know, a lot of people take it to the recycling centres, and what happens to it is it gets like put in, you know, big sheds and barns, and like under like high heat, breaks down and creates a compost, which we then use as well, and then we plant into that. It's quite sterile, so it needs a year or so before it, and you know, it's maybe good to mix some homegrown compost with it, but you know, you can get going, you know, with that, and it does suppress weeds quite a bit, so it's quite a good growing medium. So yeah, if you're resourceful, working with nature, you can grow like this. And I brought a few veggies along. Actually, some of the food that you've been eating over the last few weeks is our veggies that Brett came and got on Thursday, I think it was. And you know, your Tarlies, and you know, I've been having vegan veggies, veganic veggies on that. So yeah, I mean, we don't have any problem growing stuff. You know, we've got a wide variety of veggies, actually some of them, but yeah, you can grow like this each year. And then come sort of October, November, we start about, you know, putting things to bed, you know, giving things a bit of a rest, giving us a rest. You know, it's quite good to hibernate and, you know, work hard during the summer and take a little bit of time back over the winter. And that's what we do. We sort of cover up all our beds, and yeah, we'll come at them again in February. And before we sort of wrap up, you know, we've maybe sort of laid a bit of seaweed on, a bit of green waste compost. We've also been using green manures. I don't know if anyone's used green manures before, but plants that are going to put something back from what you've taken. So this year we did mostly Phacelia, but previously we've done clovers. I think we're probably going to do a bit of buckwheat next year. So you can like, you know, grow to put back, and that's okay. You know, you could also, like, you know, suppresses, like, you know, weeds as well by having a sort of cover crop in there. So it's all very exciting. I mean, it's all very exciting that, you know, we can thrive. Not just sustain ourselves, but thrive on healthy food that is, you know, not running or complementary to what we have already, like big ag. We need to be having all kinds of these little pilot projects, you know, springing up all around the country. You know, access to land needs to be something that, you know, the UK and other sort of big food producing countries looks to turn on its head. You know, we need to make space available and accessible for new farmers to come in and farm like this, because another thing that really gets me kind of a bit sort of shaky about food security is the average age of a farmer in the UK, I think, is 57. In the US, it's 59. And in Japan, where they have a big agricultural-led economy, it's 67. Who is going to be growing our food? Because, you know, in a few years' time, most of them are going to, you know, sort of move on and be retired, and there isn't this next generation, this next wave of people coming through to grow our food. But we need that. And I think, you know, just looking at, like, the sort of geopolitical world right now, what's been happening in Ukraine earlier in the year, obviously terrible situation there. But, you know, because we're so reliant on all those grains coming into the UK and Europe, it, you know, skews the balance of everything, and then, you know, we find ourselves in difficulties too, getting hold of, you know, basics like flours and wheat. So there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons why we need to be growing more here, and it, like I said, it doesn't have to be the way that we followed, the path that we followed, sort of pre-Second World War, because that's when things really, you know, went wrong. And even, you know, if I look back, you know, a few years ago when I was still going into, you know, factory farms and slaughterhouses and just, you know, all the insaneness of it all, and even then I was starting to see, like, a few chinks sort of in the sort of the defence, the armour of big ag. You know, I remember sort of, you know, just coming across some, you know, kids that were on a factory farm, and he was saying to me, you know, we don't want to do this. Our dad wants us to do this, but we don't want to do it. You know, all the kids at school, you know, say how bad it is, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to be a factory farmer. So there is, you know, a light at the end of this, you know, horrible tunnel that we've been stuck in for a long period of time. And if I just wrap up with one case study, I think, which really brings to light to me some of the injustices and unfairness in the world. If I go back to that pig farm I was talking to you at the start of the talk, you know, that one that was producing prestigious hams wrapped in a Tuscan sunset, you know, on its labelling, you know, all those pigs coughing with pneumonia, you know, in these factory farms, with the workers, you know, clattering through the medication drawers, trying to see what concoction they're going to bring to the into shed 7, you know, where they've got this problem and try and deal with it. If I think about that place, and then if I think about an earlier investigation that I did that took me to the very north of Argentina, you know, a very, very wild zone, a long, long way from Buenos Aires, but a place where most of the world's soy is being grown. And I love soy, you know, I use it all the time, make tofu, soy milks, you know, we do it ourselves. But, you know, as you probably know, the majority of soy is being produced not to put in the mouths of people, but to be put in the mouths of factory farmed animals. And when I went up to this very, 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 very sparse place, I'd heard about a community that had its land stolen from them, grabbed. and I wanted to see what it was all about. And it was actually a very dangerous place to go because the communities were fighting back against this industry that was grabbing their land because they wanted to plant soy for animal feed, not human feed. And families were losing members because these big companies, you know, they don't go in there with their company representatives, their nice swish, you know, two-piece suits and ties and flashy sunglasses and say, hey, would you like to be part of a new program growing soy for us? What we need to do is, well, we'd have to cut back some of these trees that give you, sort of medication from. We just have to take them out. And where you grow your plants, you know, those veggies and herbs, we're just going to have to like sort of bulldoze over those. And your house is in the way too, so we're just going to come through here with a big sort of like digger and smash that apart. And the last thing we should do is your well water, we're just going to drop a few drops of poison in there because that way you won't be able to survive there. And that's the way they want it, because these companies, that's how they deal with this. Like I said, they don't send in the men in suits, they send in like bullies, they send in like people who will kill people to take land so it can grow soy to put in the mouths of factory farmed animals. And I found a lady there called Ramona. She was about the age of my grandmother, probably in about her 80s. And she was sat, sort of huddled down on a little deck chair like this. Often, like, I used to remember my grandma sitting, in the summer, on a little deck chair. And she had a tarp above her. And the reason she had a tarp above her is because, her well water had been poisoned, her house had been smashed down, her plants, medications had been destroyed, her food had been destroyed, her family had been killed because these companies want to grow soy. And they were growing soy with the same people that was producing those prestigious hams and meats in Italy, in that factory farm. And I told Ramona that her loss of everything she knew was not going for anything beneficial at all somewhere else in the world. It was going simply to keep the meat business alive. So join up the dots, and this is where our food has taken us. We don't want to be doing this anymore. Let's do vegan farming. So, show of hands for like vegan farmers, yeah? Hey.
Sí, bueno, así vienen ellos armados, todos vienen con armas, todo.
Sí, y estaba yo solo con el chico apenas, pero un montón se metieron todos.
Un 10 a 12%, o sea que prácticamente ha sido devastador el proceso.
No quiero dinero, no voy por fin de lucro, no quiero nada. Quiero la salud de mi hijo, quiero unos hijos sanos que en el futuro, el día de mañana, puede decir que anden gozando.
When the forests are torn down for soybean cultivation, it's a question of life or death.
I'm in Argentina, the birthplace of intensive soy production here in South America. Everywhere you look, you see the shadow of the soy industry. But this bean isn't being used to feed people here. Instead, it's being shipped thousands of miles around the world to fill the bellies of cows, pigs and chickens, mostly in factory farms. And there's a darker side to this green gold rush. I'm here to look for the stories that I've heard of lands being grabbed and people's lives being destroyed, all in the pursuit of profit, whatever the cost.
The social costs, the environmental costs, the health costs that this cultivation involves. That's all carried by society, and the big business who are profiting from this. I mean, they don't carry those costs. It's all society's costs.
So, show of hands for like vegan farmers, yeah? Hey. All right, okay, that's me wrapped up. Does anyone want any questions? What's that? Yes, so I don't know what happened to Ramona, and I often think about Ramona, what happened, especially that my grandma's not here now. But I think Ramona was like lots of other people, and there were many Ramonas up in that part of Argentina, and it still goes on. Still, this whole land grabbing exercise still goes on. So I don't know what happened to that. No, a lot of the indigenous communities, like, lived off the land, forest communities, they don't think, they have sort of like a tradition, I guess, that, this land has been there for a long time, as long as their ancestors, have passed down this land. And it's kind of common land, I guess, and they've been very sort of poorly treated in terms of protection. Like, I guess if you were like a squatter, maybe, or I mean, maybe even like a community like this, that has its fair share of like fears on the horizon to how it might exist in the future. They are left to hung and dry. But also it's come down to the politics. The politics of the country we also have politicians that are connected to the industry, involved with like JPS and all those kind of companies. Sounds fine. I just heard this, But we've got to stay hopeful, because there's a lot, in the news that's hitting day in, day out, which is, really sort of questioning whether, humanity, our existence as we know it, will be something that, the next generations can adapt to and survive from. I don't know, but there's definitely pockets of hope. Places like this, the veganic farming movement. I read this. It's great. I'm a member. So I think we just have to, make sure that we share all these stories. Stand up in our communities. Talk about, storytelling. It's really, really important. For 20 years, I was completely anonymous. I didn't want to tell any of these stories. I just wanted to give the evidence to people that could go out and tell those stories for me. But I've realised I can't stay quiet about what I've seen and what I've documented and what I've heard. I have to try ways of telling those stories, like Ramona's story. I try and share that story whenever I can, but also I try and share, the solution as well. And what we're trying to do is, just be one small scale solution of, showing that we can do things another way. And we're not doing it with any subsidies, so I'm not taking any money from you in your taxes. But big industry is, big ag, you're paying for the pollution that ag is causing to our waterways, the subsidies that they get to farm or not to farm. We're not paying for anything good. Actually, even just a few years ago, when we were still part of the EU, I did an investigation on international financing of factory farming, and I think we were all paying about £30 a year to give to factory farms popping up in places where factory farming was never a thing. So countries like Kurdistan, Kazakhstan, Turkey, which is massively increasing the number of factory farms, particularly the dairy industry. And they're all getting money from us, from our pockets, to do all these things that we've realised now, after 50 years, are not good for animals, are not good for us, are not good for the health of our nation. We're paying for the costs indirectly every day, and yet the financing to export all these mistakes to parts of the world that are in a sort of geographically and physically and with resources they have, perhaps in a better situation than we are. They come from a bad place and they're trying to go somewhere, and get some of the benefits that our society's had, and good on them. But we're selling them down the river because we're selling them a myth that big agriculture is the way to go, it's the way to feed people. It's just not. But unfortunately, this is what's happening. China, Poland, these places have just had massive investment into factory farming.
Can you tell us more about the seaweed, how you use that
Yeah, so I suppose the first challenge with getting seaweed now, particularly from the harbour, is you've got to scan it for plastics, microplastics. I used to run Surfers Against Sewage for 6 years, so some of you might know that campaign group. Very, very effective group, done a lot for the quality of water around our coastlines. But yeah, plastics were I think 2002, 2003 we started doing campaigns around plastics. So yeah, microplastics are just a massive problem. So we have to try and find a way when we collect and harvest to try and get rid of that, which is normally just a simple pick and then like a recycling, and then we'll have to pick it as we see it, on the farm. But plastic on land now, as well as in the sea, is just like inherent. It's like it's here to stay. Unfortunately, for 500 years, 600 years. So I'm not sure how we're going to deal with that. But yeah, generally we get the seaweed. We don't do anything special. We don't rinse it off, and we're not worried about the salt content, anything like that. And we just put it straight onto our beds. And we did that. Yeah, mulch on top of it. We normally do a few inches, and we do that in the winter. And then we tarp. We tarp it for the winter, and then we're ready to grow in the spring. And then we normally dress it with some compost on top. So it's broken down a lot. We do use tarps, which is something from the oil industry. But we've actually salvaged all those tarps from other places. We got them for free. McSalvers, we got them from McSalvers that they were chucking away. So we don't like using them as part of our growing, but having something that covers is quite good. And so we'll just put them to use until we can't, and we'll find better ways of doing it.
Or to stop rain leaching nutrients?
Yeah, it's basically, it's a bit of both really. Also, the tarps will help material break down a lot quicker underneath. It gets quite warm under there. So what we don't want with our growing is we don't want our beds left just showing the soil, because like you say, the winter here will just the downpours will just run all the good stuff out of it, and then that will create a problem for someone downstream of us, I guess. Not that we're that kind of scale to be a problem, but definitely seen it around here. Runoff from big daffodil farms, cauliflowers, potatoes. That's what we do a lot of here. And you often see those fields that earth exposed across the winter, and it's just the soil is just running off, and everything that's good in there is just running off and being lost. And then that farm's back in that situation again, where it's having to apply fertilizers and all kind of artificial inputs to get the veg growing enough to be sellable later in the year. So yeah, it's I wouldn't think too much of it. I wouldn't be bothered about salt content. Some people say that salt's not great for plants. I just get it on and let it break down for 6 months, and then it is quite low. Yeah.
The one thing we do is when we're collecting the seaweed, we avoid any really thick chunky bits, because we find that they just don't break down very easily. So we just remove those bits.
They're like kombu and kelpy stuff.
Yeah, they're like the kelp bits. I don't know what they're called. The whole part.
Oh right, okay, yeah, shredder. Yeah, that would definitely help.
How do you actually get it out of the harbour?
Well, we have a pick. Well, the harbour's, because it's got the slipway for the boats. If you park at the top of the slipway, and we had pickup, so just buckets and chuck it straight in the back. And
So you're not doing it by hand?
Sorry?
You're not using it to eat them, you're using it for land?
I might have a nibble on it if I feel right. But yeah, seaweed's very good for just generally to eat and stuff. So yeah.
Can I ask 2 quick questions?
Yeah.
Firstly about bare soil, as well as the runoff problem, is it also a problem with the sun damaging the soil that's left there, or is that not so much of a problem?
Well, I guess sun is just going to bake it, isn't it? So it's going to crack it, and it's going to be really hard to plant into. Yeah. So that would, especially if you look at the fields now and beds now, you'll see a lot of parched land, which is, well, traditional farmers would find it difficult to plant into. I mean, we haven't, because we use mulches, like say seaweed and green waste, we actually use a little water because the mulch soaks up a lot of water, so you're not so reliant on having to water.
My second quick question is probably quite obvious. I love the idea of having the tails and butterflies and so on, but do you, for your cabbages that you're growing, do you have a physical barrier?
Yeah, we do have to net those,
Thank you.
yeah.
We also hand collect them and move them across to the sort of sacrificial patch. If they do get in, we just hand pick them and move them. Yeah.
This is probably why we do need subsidies to help us do things like this.
How many boxes do you do?
It depends. I think last year we were doing about 20. This year we've done a bit less. So, I mean, it's a small scale. I think really we should be doing probably, because we're both still campaigning, we do some campaign work as well for different NGOs. I think for someone to do it full time, I think you'd need to do 50 a week probably. But there's a lot more market gardens in Cornwall now, and it's, I think the Land Workers Alliance and the Vegan Organic Network, it's inspiring new people to grow and try and grow, but it's still a bit tough, I think.
The difficulty is that a lot of entry-level positions are not paid, and so it relies on people having savings. I know, for myself, I'm a grower, but it's hard to get paid work in the sector as an entry-level person, and then even harder if you're vegan and in particular about the methods that you want to use to grow. So it kind of, and then on top of that, the work where it does it consistently.
Yes.
So it feels very competitive. Because a lot of people can't access the land today.
Well, I think first off, I guess it comes down to people not valuing food enough, perhaps, in terms of how much the true cost of producing food is. But then as well, I'm saying about how food is causing so much indirect costs by the way it is produced in other ways, which are harmful and damaging, that we pay for, but we don't see that we're paying for them. So we need to readdress that. But I think access to land for new entrant growers, at good deals, because it's not easy to buy land. That's going to be really important, and I believe there will be some sort of new incentives to do that. The other challenge that we have is, because we're vegan, we can't buy in food from anyone else because there aren't enough outlets that we would feel happy buying from, because we can't guarantee that they're using
that's the risk then if any crops fail, especially if you
Yes. Yeah. Do we have any crops that fail?
Well, we lost in the hot weather. We lost basically all of our salad. It all went bitter, and we very quickly realised that this was going to be too complicated to try and find an option we felt comfortable buying in from. But I mean, in terms of access to land, I think we've been quite lucky. We rent our site from a woman who lives very close to us. She's got a lot of land. Most of it is used for horses, and she rents that out. So we pay the horse rate for a field, but she's just interested in this kind of stuff, so it works well. So I think it's not the best solution because we're only on a yearly contract, so at any time she could take that away from us if she wanted to.
I think the big, though, won't work. That won't be so good for smaller growers like us. Transitioning, big ag into producing more plants. There's several campaigns on the go at the moment that's trying to encourage people to switch from animals to plants, plant proteins. on a scale that would generate a lot for the UK. I think we've got to hope there's a few more pioneers ready to do that. There's been a few in the last few years, but not enough. But I think whether it's vegan or not, I think just generally, that sort of small scale community market gardens, which if you look at places like Paris, they had market gardens surrounding the capital, a few hundred years ago. You're producing a lot of food for a lot of people in close proximity to the city. And I think we just need that sort of revolution again of like more local growers, and whether the subsidies are going to support that, at least until you get yourself on your feet. They should be going to that type of farming, but they're not eligible. If you're growing on less than sort of 5 acres, which a lot of market gardens are for community growing projects, they're ineligible to the kind of land stewardship kind of grants and subsidies that bigger traditional harmful growers, if you like, are able to tap into. It's just skewed against you at the moment. So
there is that shared project. I can't remember who it's organised by or what it's called, but it's like where some organisation is getting chunks of land and then
I know the Biodynamic Association do that as well, but obviously you then have to do their preparations to become vegan. But I totally
feel like an awesome step to farm, wouldn't it? To get big acreage together and have lots of different complementary groups all working together.
Definitely. That would work well. One focusing on veg boxes, one doing herbs, one to restaurants, one to wholesale.
Exactly.
And having that group growers working together, all sharing the same tools. One tool shared. I'll use this tool today.
And then you're marketing everything like that.
Because we looked at one of those land share options, but then we realised that one of the people on there was raising pigs, and we just felt like we'd be working next to the pigs, and we get to know them, it would be really traumatic. But it was just not an option.
Obviously, we're amongst people who are probably a bit like us. It's got to be. You can't involve any suffering or cruelty at all, and you probably make a rod for your own back with it. But so what? You've got to lead by example, and just find ways around it. And that's, I guess, what we're trying to do.
What about vegan organic mushrooms? Is there any vegan organic mushroom farms in the UK? Sort of indoor spaces?
That's a good question.
Because then you'd be able to control the light and stuff like that.
I know there was a bit of a boom with mushroom growers a few years ago. A lot of them using sort of portable setups, shipping containers, using a lot of sort of perhaps energy intensive sort of equipment to get things going. And they seem to be sort of walking away from it of late. So I don't know if they've been able to compete with China, who are producing a lot of mushrooms now, and actually producing a lot of mushrooms in the UK, where they can sort of benefit from the supply chain a bit further afield. But I feel like it's like anytime you're small, you're going to have a challenge, aren't you? Finding your place amongst others, but actually it'd be worth mentioning to Dan probably. Perhaps a few more articles in Growing Green International about mushrooms and growing organically. I think that would be interesting in seeing that.
I was going to ask, did you do any open days or anything like that? I'd love to.
We haven't done any open days, but I think our sort of philosophy would be to do that in the future. And we have a few volunteers, who dip in and out, and one regular volunteer that helps, for a share of the harvest. We're part of the CSA movement, so the community supported agriculture. So while we're not following exactly the model that a lot of CSA farms follow, the principle is that you get a share of the harvest weekly through the season. What's the challenge in Cornwall is that generally the incomes aren't high enough for people to put a whole season up front, so a few £100, I suppose, and people are living all week to week, in Cornwall, so we kind of adapt it, so we do like a month at a time, and then if you want to dip out for a bit, you can come back or do it weekly or whatever. But I think, all those kind of community-focused farms normally, are happy to be transparent about what they do. So whether we have an open day or not, just pick up the phone, come down, we'll work something out. Okay, well let's do that. I'm going to say, and that goes the same for all of you, and I'm just thinking there's not enough parking. But in principle, it's the same for everyone.
What's your customer base like? Are there any vegans, people who are buying from you because it's vegan?
There's. We've actually only really focused our marketing just at the vegan community. But again, like Cornwall, we're spread out, so that doesn't work, for us economically to do a drop in Penzance instead of a drop in Bude. So we can't do that. But we focus basically from where we are in Lisgarn, so up the Chasewater, across the Banner, down to Penryn, Falmouth, and back up to Carnarvon Downs. So it's, like I say, it's 5 or 6 miles, 4 or 5 miles tops. But I think the most rewarding thing is actually the immediate community. So there's 4 or 5 neighbours that are, adjoining the farm, I guess, or overlooking the farm. None of whom were vegan, but you get a chance to sort of talk to them and tell them why you're doing what you're doing, and they start getting a bit nosier, and some days they're outside the gate, in the early days, and then they're sort of a few steps in.
And their kids are starting to blame Rich because now they're not allowed to go to McDonald's and it's our fault. There's a bit of guilt going on there. But they've wanted to learn about it, and not just they've seen the benefit of getting food fresh and picked within a few hours, delivered locally, supporting a local grower, but they have been sort of woken up to some of the stories I guess I shared earlier, and thinking, and like I say, no more trips to McDonald's for some of them. But actually I think it's, if anything, that's definitely the more rewarding bit, where you're getting to help change people's behaviours, and get people informed so they can make an informed decision for themselves. Not laying things on thick and heavy. In 2019, I ran the Veganuary campaign, which is obviously taken off for January, and it was a big jump that year. And the rationale for the way that we campaigned and ran that campaign was inspiring and supporting people on their journeys, to try veganism for a month. And I think over 70% on the data shows that people stick with it globally. So that works. If I go at them and say, you can't fall off the wagon, you should be giving yourself a massive guilt trip for switching back to that sausage sandwich last week. No, it's that happens, as we form new habits. So we definitely, that's how we approach things. At some point, are you aiming to do year-round?
I'm not sure if we'll do it on this site, but our kind of future thinking, future plans, we would, perhaps.
And if you did that, would you consider changing that model when people can come?
We're thinking anyway, maybe about changing the model a little bit. Really, what I think would be really useful if we were almost a little bit closer to a guy called Ian Tolhurst, you might have heard of, produces organic food. Was he here yesterday?
Yeah, he was, yeah.
Oh, really?
Did he?
Having a day out with him.
Right, really? Oh, cool. To be honest, you would have got a lot more from this talk than this interview, to be honest. But, he shows it's possible. So, just have to tap into the way that he does things. And he doesn't, I think he rents that land. I don't think he owns the land that he's got. And,
but he does work more hours in a week than there are in a week.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the patterns that we observe amongst market gardeners and small-scale growers, is that they do seem to more often than not work themselves into the ground, and I think it's something you have to be really careful about, because
and often it's because they can't afford to pay someone else
Yeah.
to do the work, and then
Yeah.
that causes issues with new entrants doing it, so it's
Yeah.
like a really big kind of
Yeah.
interconnected problem.
Yeah. So I think the long and short of this is that it's not this isn't like, okay, what we do still has flaws, we know that, but it's a hell of a lot better than some of the places I've seen, and it's hard work, but that's good. We don't mind that, because it's good for you, it's good for the soul. And actually, if I'm being completely honest, after 20 years of looking at the worst, day in, day out, being surrounded by people who are just cruel to others, whether it's sentient creatures or they're migrant workers, who come from a bad place, trying to seek a better life, and find themselves having to work in factory farms on slaughter lines. They don't want to be doing that, but that's all they can do. But after 20 years of looking at those stories every day, I needed to just sort of embrace this a little bit, get some love from this. These are fun, by the way. These are...
I don't remember what they're called. They're some kind of summer squash. I don't remember what
summer
they're
squash. So any more questions? Or
just a single thing, your thoughts on the Kiss the Ground documentary?
I did watch that. Was it a couple of years ago I watched it? Is that Woody Harrelson one? Yeah, I think it was good. There was a lot of good stuff in there. I think it came from perhaps sort of not the veganic kind of perspective. So it was still kind of, I guess, sort of pasture fed cattle, rewilding. But it was a hell of a lot better than what we have, and there was some really good, interesting stuff on there. So one to watch. I'm not sure if you can get it on Water Bear, which is the one I mentioned earlier. Alright, okay, I'll wrap up there. And don't forget to watch, on Water Bear on the 8th of September, a new documentary called Slay. It focuses on the fashion industry for the first time and its use of animals and people in like tanneries. I was lucky enough to be interviewed for it and provide some footage for it. So I'm hoping it's going to be one of the things that gets the fashion industry using more of this, because you can do a hell of a lot with plants for like textiles and fabrics, and we don't need animal leathers and furs and wool to sort of sustain ourselves. So you can do a lot of things with plants. Believe me.
What was the name of the documentary?
It's called Slay.
Slay.
Yeah, it's 8th of September. And it's Water Bear, and it's actually a free streaming platform.
Water B-E-A-R.
Yeah.
Oh, it's free, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like I think it's Stella McCartney funded, or Prince Harry funded, or they're both involved. But it's basically an alternative to Netflix. And if anyone wants books, I've got some books I'm happy to sign a few. If anyone wants something to read in their last night here.